Bonjour, hello, welcome back to Deals with Simon. Today we are going to discover the 8 particular steps of purchasing an off-plan property here in Dubai. We're going to look into the transaction process of what kind of documents, what kind of paperwork has to be signed at which particular stage. So that helps you a lot to avoid any surprises later on in the process, and that gives you a full understanding, a full clarity of what has to be done and what are your obligations, what are the obligations of the developer, for example, okay? And it gives you basically a whole understanding of the overall purchase process. So this video has a huge importance for you. Let's stick with me till the end, because step number 6 and step number 5 already are super important, super critical, and they could literally cost you your property if you do any mistakes at this particular point. With that being said, let's hop into the examples and let's start with step number 1. So for demonstration purposes only, we just use the example of Dubai Holdings when it comes to the EUI form. So Dubai Holdings consisting out of Miraz, Nakheel, Dubai Properties and Medan, as we already know it. And what we can find here directly is basically an EUI form, a sheet, a very simple sheet where we have empty fields to be filled out, obviously, right? And my job is basically to deliver the developer the necessary information about you yourself as an individual, and on the other side about the property itself which you want to acquire, which then raises our chances to get exactly the allocation for the unit that we want. So below you can already find an explanation here at this particular 10 points what actually the EUI means, and it guarantees you that's the amount which we need to submit in the beginning, okay, is 100% refundable, for example. And 2 particular fields are super important to be filled out, which is number 1, the investor details, and number 2, the inventory details. So let me give an example of what that means. Investor details, I think this is very clear. Information about you yourself as an individual, or about the company, trade license, registration, for example, in case that you want to purchase the property through a company, which is possible as well here in Dubai, but topic of another video. And number 2, inventory details, extremely important for me to fill out. So let's say, as an example, we want to go for the Acres Estates, a 5-bedroom mansion, type H, for example, Ivory Collection. These units were sold immediately on the launch day, so there's no inventory left anymore, so an extremely hot product. And in case we want to acquire one of those units, then it's my job, for example, to put in, for example, type H and the exact unit numbers based on the master plan and the floor plans, okay? And then obviously what is the purchase price, what is the plot area that we want to acquire, and so on. So a couple of more information, which is then obviously my job, but your job is just to understand that this particular EUI form has to be submitted in order to raise our chances. And now that you have successfully submitted the EUI, let's move on to stage number 2, which is in most of the cases a sales offer. Now, a sales offer is initiated directly by the developer upon request of mine for a certain unit number out of the inventory. So we're not considering a hot launch right now. That would be, for example, an address residences directly from EMAR, which is a product that is selling out immediately without even a sales offer necessary. But now let's stick to this particular example, which is a beautiful 5-bedroom villa from Ellington. I just want to show the document that you can imagine what it's meant. So the Sanctuary Ellington, here it's names, then we find a couple of renders, a couple of pictures, just to make it a little bit more visual. And the most important part of a sales offer is actually this particular category, which I'm marking right now, so you can see it clearly here. And this category here, okay, is the most important when it comes to the information. So you can see it clearly. What we can find here is the unit number 302. It's a 5-bedroom villa. The size is 7,900 square foot, sitting on a 5,700 square foot plot, okay? And the total purchase price, selling price, is 26.2 million dirhams. That's the first information that we can get out of here, as well as the payment plan, which is extremely important and necessary as well to compare the payment plan. Here we can find a 60-40 payment plan. We can find the milestones over here, okay? And then the percentages of what has to be paid at which particular time in the middle, and then on the right column we find the exact dirham amount which has to be paid as well, okay? And that gives us super clarity, and this is a perfect base for a comparison to a certain other product. And then we can, for example, list 2 or 3 sales offers with each other and can compare the exact information. Now the EUI has allowed us to pick and choose the exact unit that we wanted to have initially. The sales offer just underlined and confirmed the unit information that we needed to check before continuing with the final purchase. And now, considering we made the purchase and we made the decision, we move into stage number 3, which is the booking form / reservation contract, okay? And here again, I'm showing you a very transparent example of one of my clients. Obviously, I blurred out their contact information because it's a very sensitive and private data. And obviously, what we can find here is a reservation contract, as it says, from the Orise development, okay? Jumeirah Peninsula, master plan from Beyond by Omniat, one of my absolute favorite picks when it comes to waterfront developments here in Dubai. And what it basically says, it's an overview and a summary of what was agreed on in the sales negotiation process, okay? as well from the developer, as well as you as the client. And what we can find here are some purchaser details, obviously, and that's why I blurred them out. Here again, we can find some information about the property itself. Then on the next page, we find all the terms and conditions of the developer itself as a summary. Extremely important for you to double check if everything is fine here with you. And then we can find the signature stages, as well as again a summary of the payment plan. Why this is super important here, we were actually able of getting a 50-50 payment plan, super attractive. We can find the due date here, okay, and here I advise my clients all the time to double check the payment plan as well before signing the particular document in order to be fully secure and fully clear on everything, okay. This is basically the most important information out of the reservation contract. Again, here this was a G+2 property, this was a chalet, beautiful, okay. We can even find here the particular layout / floor plan, okay. This is how the reservation contract looks in practice, and once we sign this particular document, we can move on to stage number 4. You have now signed the booking form / reservation contract. However, you're not yet 100% the owner of that property. That is only the case once you completed and signed the SPA, Sales Purchase Agreement, and that document has to be countersigned by the developer as well. This happens in stage number 5, extremely essential and important. In order to get there, we need to complete the compliance form. So basically a KYC, know your customer sheet, and I'm pretty sure you're aware of such a sheet because whenever you're buying a property or any expensive goods, the seller is asking you for this kind of information just to protect themselves in terms of anti-money laundering, okay? Now, with that being said, let's just dive into an example of our brokerage, because in most of the cases when you buy a property here, you need to fill out that KYC for us as a brokerage, because we need to report that deal to the Dubai department, number 1, and number 2, for the developer as well, okay? So there are 2 different KYC sheets to be filled out. Now, let's keep it very simple, let's dive into it. So we can directly see the Know Your Customer individual form from our brokerage, okay? And it requires a couple of personal information here. Then obviously residential address is super important in case that you have an office address. Then it goes to the next page, politically exposed person. In most of the cases, hopefully, it's just a clear no and nothing else to put in here. Then identification details, very important in terms of passport and Emirates ID or national ID, those kind of things, okay? Then employment / business information, which basically just means does the money come from a salaried position or just from a business owner position, okay, that we can find here. And then financial information, just very briefly, don't have to be exactly onto the dirham exact, the overall wealth and basically where's that money coming from, etc, etc. This is just basically the KYC sheet, super simple, super effective, and just essentially the overall process in order now to be eligible for the SPA. We are now eligible to sign the SPA, the Sales and Purchase Agreement, which is the legally binding contract between you and the developer and just confirms and underlines your 100% ownership of that property. Bear in mind, in order to get to that stage where we can sign this document, we need to have the down payment 100% completed, okay? So the down payment in most of the cases is 20% of the overall total purchase value. It is written down very accurately in every single payment plan, okay? Together with the 4% Dubai Land Department fee. That's just as a little side note. And now let's head into the document which I prepared for you, just as an example again. This is how a Sales and Purchase Agreement looks like. Here again, we have an example from the incredible developer Beyond by Omniat, okay? And you can see the document is a 60-page PDF. It is basically just the PDF version of the digital DocuSign format. Every single element, every single information which was communicated prior to that stage is written down. Super important for you, super important for the developer, because it just underlines who is in charge of which kind of steps and who has to deliver what exactly. And it just confirms your due payment, just confirms what the developer has to deliver you at which particular stage, and so on, okay? This is the overall idea of the Sales Purchase Agreement. What's super important is this particular part here that we can see it, ownership percentage. It just like shows us here 100% ownership, and everything else which I already explained is written in here. So this document is extremely important. Once you signed it and once the developer has countersigned it, then you are the owner of the property, and then you can continue with step number 6. Congratulations! With the signature of the SPA, you are now the owner of this particular property. Now the next step is the official registration in the Dubai Land Department through the Ukudi system done by the developer itself. And once this particular step is completed, you're getting, as a result out of it, your Ukud document, which is extremely important because it just shows your ownership in one simple PDF with a QR code, and this QR code is essential to apply for the next steps, okay? So let's hop into the screen. What we can see directly here is an Ukud example from one of my clients. Again, I blurred out all their important and sensitive data of their personal details, okay? Now everything starts with the contract number, okay, and this Ukud. Then obviously the property information, as you can see it here. That's why I mark it there. Zack. just confirms basically everything about the property, purchase price, and so on. And then we can see the parties, okay? There we have the seller, number 1, and we have the buyer, number 2. And here again, seller's information and buyer information. And then most importantly, this is basically what I want to emphasize here, is this QR code / this number here below this QR code, which I have blurred out, which is the property number. And with this particular property number, you can open the Dubai REST app and basically check the status of your property, the construction progress, for example, and all sorts of other information. And this is pure transparency. And this is exactly why this OKU document is so essential and so important. Incredible. We have now completed and signed all sorts of documents. And with the OKU and with the ownership confirmation, you are basically done. However, at this particular stage, you could potentially apply for your golden visa, which I highly recommend you. The golden visa is basically an opportunity given by the UAE that you can come and go for the next 10 years whenever you want. And anyone can apply for a golden visa with a property purchase from 2 million dirhams upwards, okay? Now, I won't go into too many details here because this is, number 1, not my job, but I do have very reliable partners where we continue with the golden visa application, okay? And we have an exact form, which you can see here on my screen, okay? An exact 11-step process of how this golden visa process is actually done. And once you reach this particular stage, I can connect you to this particular person, to this group of absolute experts, and they complete the process of the golden visa mostly within 7 to 10 working days, which is absolutely great. And this is another big advantage which you can use here in collaboration with me. And last but not least, step number 8, which is the possibility to mortgage / finance the final installment payment on completion. And number 2, the execution of the title deed. So let me explain you what the title deed basically is. Very simple. It is literally the substitute, the exchange of the ukud once the property turns from under construction all the way till 100% completion / handover, okay? Just the name changes. It still demonstrates your 100% ownership, okay? With the code, with the number, there's nothing to be changed. Basically just the structure of the whole document, but everything stays the same, okay? So here we have a title deed. You can see it from one of my clients. Already quite old here, 2021. It was issued, and there we have down here the information, okay, which is all centrally positioned here about the property. And in the right corner, we find the very important QR code / the number here in order to look out for this particular property, okay? That's the title deed. That's the substitute for the ukud, considering your ownership. Now, going back to the financing / mortgaging option. Super simple. It happens sometimes, okay? When it really makes sense, I advise my clients to actually go for that. What we can do is when we have a very attractive payment plan, let's say a 50-50 payment plan, and we have a property valued, let's say 60 million off-plan purchase, then we can pay the 30 million, okay, through the installments till the completion in a time period of, let's say, 2 to 4 years. And then on completion, you can use those 30 million dirhams, okay, the other 50%, and mortgage them. So in case that we can get a very good interest rate, which is not extremely high, and it makes sense in your overall financing concept, we can then mortgage this particular amount, okay? To mortgage generally off-plan properties is quite difficult here, and there are like certain rules to be applied, but when it's about the final completion installment, this is definitely something we can do and we can consider, and we already did that a couple of times, and we have one very, very competent cooperation partner who works with 12 local banks here in Dubai, in the UAE in general, and we all the time do those cases together with him. It turned out to be very successful. With that being said, these are the 8 steps, okay? That's the overall concept of this particular process of purchasing an off-plan property here in Dubai. Well done if you watched the video so far, because the information which I've released today is extremely important, extremely essential if you're in the middle of a property purchase. And by now you should have full clarity and full confidence of how this overall process looks like, what are the documents about, what is the paperwork all about, what has to be signed at which stage. You should have full understanding and full knowledge of the overall property purchase when it comes to off-plan here in Dubai. And in case that you have not considered yet speaking with me, you have not booked a call yet in the past, then this might be the perfect chance for you, because most probably I have answered a burning question on your mind in this particular video, and you feel a little bit more confident of actually applying to work with me and looking out for what we can do here in Dubai's real estate market. With that being said, click the link below this particular video, fill out the form, give me some upfront information. The more the better, because I can properly prepare myself for the meeting. I will take 45 minutes of my time and I will consult you in the best possible way which I can, and I can guarantee you that the time that you're going to invest here is not wasted. The opposite is the case. It will pay off multiple times what your time is worth. Okay, with that being said, click the link below, book a call, see you on the other side, and see you in Dubai.